Hello and welcome to Sharing Our Cultures. This is the place where you get to meet amazing individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds who are making significant contributions to the social, cultural and economic development of Newfoundland and Labrador. Joining me today are Fatima Mansoure, President of Women of Hope, and Grace Okwera, a teacher at the Association for New Canadians. Welcome back to Sharing Our Cultures. Sharing this time with me is Fatima Mansoure, President of the Women of Hope organization. Welcome, Fatima.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right. It's great to see you.
It is.
Yeah, it's like old times, girl. Yeah. I'm so happy that you're with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, so tell me, what's this Women of Hope organization all about?
Well, it's an organization that works on successful integration into St. John's, Newfoundland.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so why did you start it?
Well, I've spoken to a lot of people and the experiences I've had myself, and we have a lot of obstacles, I'll say, integrating into this society. And so I thought it would be nice to get women together, hear their opinions, hear what they're going through, and form a group that we could help each other and help the community.
Okay. So can you share with us what are some of these obstacles that they face?
Integration. One is the language barrier,
Okay.
all right? And I find there are some people who don't speak English, so that hinders job opportunities. And then they get kind of depressed and stay home and they self-isolate.
Okay.
They just stay home by themselves with their children, and that's a problem. Another thing is misconceptions. I find, I'll take for an example, a job interview. A person of color will go for a job interview, and in some parts of Africa, you're not supposed to look someone straight in the eye because it's considered shady.
Yes.
That's here in St. John's, but in some parts of Africa, you are taught not to look someone in the eye because it's disrespectful. So someone here coming here from Africa and they're in a job interview and they don't look someone in the eye, which to them it's respect, it's a sign of respect. But the employer would say, well, I mean, why aren't you looking me in the eye? What's going on here? What are you hiding? So things like that, you know, so just education. So we provide education on that, on the culture here and what to expect and things like that.
Okay. And I'd say because of the language barrier, some might also have difficulties with their landlords in terms of,
Absolutely.
you know, what is supposed to be, what they're supposed to do, what the landlord's supposed to provide, you know. So how do you feel the community can support you to help these women through these obstacles?
I think the greatest thing is education. I really do. I think there is a lot of, I use the word ignorance in a nice way, but there's a lot of ignorance. And you said about landlords, so let me give you an example,
Okay.
all right? We had an international family who was looking for a place to live, and they had a third party, which was a Newfoundlander, who went and found a place for them, a house for them. Everything was paid. So the person who owned the home thought they were renting to a Newfoundlander.
Oh, okay.
They didn't know they were renting to a person of color. So when it was day for moving in, and the family went, and then the homeowner was like, what's going on here? Who is this? And they said, well, this is the person you rented. No, that's not what I signed up for. Because they don't know, right? So
Yeah,
they have
okay.
misconceptions. And really, there's nowhere you can go to actually learn about, to you know, break down these barriers.
Right.
So they have preconceived ideas and, you know, stereotypes, and they just flow with that.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's a need for that educational piece.
Absolutely.
Now, some of the women in your group are single moms,
Yeah.
and they're sometimes struggling with their children in school. So what are the ways in which your group, your organization can assist them?
Well, one, as a single mom living here, work is an issue, okay? So they're stressed out with work. They do encounter issues with work because you've got people from different cultures, and they do things differently. And people here interpret what that person does and judges them by the standards here, not the standards of that person. So the mother is really stressed, okay? That's one issue. The second is when a child goes to school, they're also learning to integrate into the culture. And they come home with, and sometimes the child adopts some of the behaviors here that they haven't adopted, that they haven't grown up with, and they bring that into the home. So it just adds more stress for the parent. And so they don't have someone to talk to about that. Single mothers who go to work, they don't know babysitters. They can't afford to buy a baby, pay a babysitter, right? So all those challenges hinder their integration.
Now, you're a community health nurse with Eastern Health, and just wanted to find out, what was your journey like getting to the position you're here now?
I've got to say, my position with community health nursing, I love it. It is my dream job. I used to work in Emerge, which was, it was a rough experience in Emerge. But community, I get to go into people's homes. They give me the opportunity to go into the home and treat them there. I find the people there are great. When I go into someone's home, I respect that person and the culture and their beliefs and whatever they do in their home. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And it's a great experience.
So what do you think the government or the community can do to make this place more welcoming for newcomers, whether they're single moms or young people?
I think the first and foremost thing is, I think in St. John's, Newfoundland, we need to recognize that there is a problem. You can't solve a problem without recognition. We need to recognize that there is an issue. Integration is an issue. Racism, discrimination, stereotypes, all that is an issue. And I think education is the biggest thing. We need to put the education out there. So I'll give you another example. One of my ladies in my group, she works in home care. So home care is, they have casual positions, so they don't get benefits or anything like that. So this person was given 2 weeks. So she's like, great, I can pay my bills with this 2 weeks, right? She had to do home care for 2 weeks with a particular family. So this lady was so excited, found a friend who could babysit her kids, and went on this journey, went to this person's home to do the home care. And the person opened the door and said, I'm sorry, we don't let people of color in here. We don't let black people, I quote. And so she lost those 2 weeks because the agency was like, well, if he's not letting you in the home, you can't do it. And there is no sick leave. There are no benefits. So she lost 2 weeks without it. So that is hard. But if we educate people, and try to break down the barriers and try to break down the stereotypes. And if they get to know who we are, then there wouldn't be, I'm hoping that there wouldn't be cases like that someone loses 2 weeks' pay, not because she was incompetent, not because she couldn't speak the language, but because she was met at the door and it was her skin color. That person wasn't given a chance. And this shouldn't be happening today, but I think it's education. We really need to, the government needs to do programs, put billboards out there of who we are, integration. Do you know what I mean? So we won't be seen as, oh my gosh, the other.
Right, and that is difficult because education can come in many forms, as you say, and I remember at one time the government had a program, an ad to stop abuse against women, and we were talking about that and saying that was so effective. Maybe they should have something similar to that where we can talk about the issues that people of color, Africans are here, or immigrants are here. Maybe we need to have something out there about not to discriminate against people as well. So the different ways in which we can educate the community, because as you say, it's either one, ignorance, or maybe fear of, well, we don't know really what this person's going to say or they're going to do, or how am I going to interact with them. Now, you have a son as a young adult.
Yes, I do. I love him. He's my heart.
You love him to bits, I know. And what do you see as his future here if he stays in this province?
Well, my son is 20 and he's thinking about leaving, which saddens me, but job opportunities is a big thing here. I remember before I got my degree in nursing, I was an LPN, and I'll give you an instance. And I remember going for an interview as an LPN and saying, I passed my exam, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to change the world. And I remember in the interview, after we had finished the interview, and I said, I was talking to the person, and I said, would you like me to call you? When can I hear back? And her response was, and I quote you, we have to hire our own first before we hire someone else. Mm-hmm. And that just, wow. Yeah. It just floored me. And I was thinking, wow, I couldn't understand why and what that meant. Right. And I think now there are job issues like that people who live here do get the priority over people who come, minority groups. And so that's another thing about integration. That's one thing that hurts us, right? So we get a lot of people leaving. I've been here 20 years and I've seen so many people, so many great families, hardworking people, doctors, nurses. So they have the education, they have the skills, but they're not getting hired and they have to leave. And I hope my son doesn't have to leave. I hope my son, I'm praying that my son will live in a world where he can say, I want to be this, get the education for it, and be it. And the color of his skin shouldn't be an obstacle. Yeah.
But at least if we can talk about it, and because we really want to live together as a community of people, regardless of who we are, our national identity or the color of our skin. So that is really important. Yeah. So, and you're doing a marvelous job. We really appreciate you. I know you're taking in, young women who don't have anywhere to go. You take them into your home and care for them. You're helping, supporting them in the hospital when they're ill. You're doing such a fantastic job, and we really appreciate you. You're such a leader in our community, a mentor, and a role model. Yes.
I just want to say I work with the ladies in my group, the Women of Hope. They are phenomenal. Yes. They have their own struggles, and even though they have their own struggles, they put that struggle aside to help each other stand up, and they are phenomenal. I can't. I thank them for giving me the opportunity to work with them. I thank them for seeing my vision, seeing our vision, and working towards it. It's beautiful.
You inspire me. Thank you so much. Great. It's really been a delight to have you with us today. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Don't go away. Sharing Our Cultures will be right back. Welcome back to Sharing Our Cultures. With me now is Grace Okwera, the lead teacher at the Association for Newer Canadians. How did you manage during the pandemic? What was life like for you then?
It's similar, I believe, the same adjustment that maybe a number of people were going through. Right. First, of course, they had the scare or maybe the fear of what was going to happen. And then eventually, as we kind of adjusted to it, it's just kind of the distancing and trying to keep to just kind of keep the precautions that were necessary, whether going to the supermarkets or just going to do anything that had to take me out of home. Right, but mostly actually, I still have memories of the kind of driving out. And at one time we drove with my son actually coming through downtown St. John's. And we kind of know not a single person was there, just the lights. And so that really stayed with me. The memory of that. And so but overall we kind of managed and adjusted, and it's okay.
That's really good. That's really good. I'm happy to hear that. And but now, were you teaching during this time?
Yes.
And how did that work out for you and the students?
At the language school, actually, what has happened during this period since the outbreak of the pandemic, we kind of had to do it was certainly an adjustment. We kind of the teachers had to try to adjust to start teaching online. Right. And the good thing that happened was right before the pandemic, we had kind of introduced the students onto what is called the Google Classroom.
Google, right,
And Google Classroom is where they each had their own accounts and could join a class in the online.
Right.
And so that really helped, because then what happened is they had their accounts, and so all we had to do was remind them on what their account numbers were and the passwords.
Right.
And of course, yes, it was still a digital kind of learning for but maybe even for the teachers, they also had to adjust,
Right,
and then
yes.
the students also had to. But eventually we actually did embrace that, and it became a class. It also became actually a place where we could actually, it was a social place as well,
Right,
where
yes.
kind of, I know in my class, usually the first few minutes, the students are kind of joking with each other. They say hello to each other
Right,
and joking about what is happening with them.
Yes.
And then also even sharing their fears, like
Right,
at the
yes.
time, like the fear of they maybe listen to the news and something is happening, or there's kind of the number of people that kind of are getting what is growing at certain place, and so filling them with fears
Right.
or back home and things like
Yes,
that. So
yeah.
it was yeah.
Right. I know it was kind of a scary time for people here who had family members back home
Yes,
in areas where the numbers of cases were quite high.
That was
Yeah.
true, yeah. It was certainly a fear in that sense. And of course, if it's places where medical facilities were challenged, that was another level of, another aspect of it.
Right.
Yes, but one thing though is that I think it also really promoted keeping in touch. What in the past, like for example, you'd call a loved one or someone, a relative who's in the far, maybe just once a month and was okay.
Right.
It was kind of like more regular keeping in touch.
Yes.
So that was, I think, to a number of them was a positive thing.
Right.
Gave them the encouragement,
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
something good came out of it in a way,
Yes,
right?
indeed.
You know, and even the
Indeed,
opportunity to have it online and them have a sort of social time online as
Exactly.
well.
Yes,
And so that was good.
Yes, yeah. And there were also other supporting kind of programs that were happening as well.
Okay.
For example, there would be a conversation circle was happening.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And there were, let's say, eventually the women's group was started. They started that
Right.
too.
Okay.
And other like the youth programs they started, and so they'd kind of meet and talk. So
Right,
that kind of all kind of helped. And maybe to a few, like we did get donations to give some food hampers out. So
right, yes.
that at the time of
Right.
the COVID situation was a really needed support
Right,
as well,
yes,
because
yeah.
some were kind of isolated and
Yes.
were not kind of didn't have much in.
Okay, right,
Yes, so
yes, yeah.
that was helpful.
Oh, that's great. I think I heard about that, and I thought that was a very good idea when lots of people weren't thinking about that. I think
Yes,
the
yes.
Association for New Canadians did well to prepare hampers for
Yes,
the students and the clients
Yeah,
there.
part
so
of
that-
assessing the need at
right,
the time. Yes,
that's good.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
really great. I think that was a good. And you sort of almost had a little bit of a head start because they already were in the Google Classroom.
Yes, that
everything had
helped
sort of
a
been
lot.
placed
Yes,
yeah.
and
so that's good.
apart from that, we did get a few donations of computers, because some of the students kind of didn't have any kind of way to join the online class. Some didn't have, were really new in Canada, that they didn't have even their phones like they're hooked up yet. So that was kind of a challenge for those who so eventually we kind of had to get a listing of those who didn't have any way to join the class. And from that we kind of got to find those who really had the need, and computers were delivered right to their doorsteps.
Great. And you're such an effective teacher. So I've seen you at your work, and you do such a very good job with not only as a teacher, really, you're more like a friend to your students. And I know many of them have spoken to me and said how much that has really meant to them. And
Thank you for saying that. But I do love teaching so much. And not only that, I do kind of see my role as a teacher. Sometimes I don't only kind of look at it as a part of teaching in the classroom. I kind of, that contact with the students too does give me, like some of the learners, they get to be comfortable enough to explain or kind of ask questions of things that maybe they're uncertain about or kind of are worried about. And so I find that kind of, it's a real blessing to be in at the school there. I'm truly grateful to the Association for New Canadians for that opportunity, because I can actually borrow from my own experiences as a newcomer and try to kind of, if I can answer the questions or ease their kind of anxiety, I'm very happy to do that.
Yes, and you do that so well. Tell me, how did you get into teaching in the first place?
My journey as a teacher, I would say, maybe started in Swaziland.
Okay.
Because as a growing up girl, my mom was a teacher. Okay. But little did I know that I was going to follow in her footsteps, because because when I went to school at university, I actually studied something different. I went to Makerere University, our main university in Kampala, and I did economics and agricultural economics.
Okay.
Now, during the time when I was at the school, at the university, during the work terms, I would kind of go and work at a cooperative union, and I worked in the accounting department.
Okay.
So then what happened was, right after I graduated, I followed, my husband then had already gone down to Swaziland in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
And in Swaziland, he was teaching in a high school, I'd say a royal high school, because actually a lot of the students who were there were kind of students from the palace, which was just near.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So they kind of would come and to the school. So when I joined my husband, while I was in the hospital, actually my daughter, who was I went to Swaziland with my oldest son, and so now while I was in the hospital having my daughter Isabel, which actually I have to say was not in the same town that we were living in.
Okay.
Where we were living, called Lozita, was about 300 miles away from the hospital where I had Isabel.
Right.
And the reason why I went and had Isabel there was my uncle was a doctor in another hospital called Pigs Peak, and that's the distance, 300 kilometers away. And her wife was a nurse, so they came from there to visit us.
Okay.
And when they came to visit, they found I was, of course, standing in the kitchen and the kitchen sink, washing dishes and all, and my feet was like a football.
It was so swollen.
So swollen. So when they looked at it, they turned to my husband then, James, and said, "No, you're on your own. We are taking her." So they just kind of took me, and my son and my husband stayed back. And so I went with them to go and have Isabel in the hospital where they worked. So while I was there in the hospital, those were days when there were no cell phones. So my husband and the headmaster of the school where he's teaching came to the hospital. And when they came to the hospital, the headmaster told me that we really need an accounting teacher. They had a subject, accounting and commerce, and we have been really looking for an accounting teacher at the school, and the Ministry of the Education really wants us to have an accountant, and they give enough a deadline. So your husband told us that you did what? You did accounting, you did economics, and you worked in accounting department. So I was a bit nervous, and they had the contract there. So while I was in the hospital, they gave me the contract, and I signed the contract for the job at the hospital.
And you were there to have your baby?
Yes.
But the baby born at the time
was born.
Whilst you were signing the contract?
I was still in the hospital, and I signed it. And I asked the question, of course. I say, I'm just a new my baby,
mother.
what do I do?
Yeah.
And so the headmaster told me, say, no, we'll be very understanding,
Right.
and what, don't worry about that.
Right.
Just we need to get this back to the Ministry of Education.
Okay.
So then that was actually how I started, because I came back, and yes, the headmaster was very kind of understanding,
Right.
and we had very nice, actually, the elderly lady, Margaret Lamini, who took care of my baby when I had to go to teach.
Right.
So the headmaster told me to only go to the school when I had a class,
Right.
and I would come back home. And we lived in the same compound anyway.
So that made it
was,
very
yes,
well, that's great. Well, thank you. Thanks.
That's how I started.
You started your teaching career.
Yes, it did show me that I had a passion in teaching. Of course, when I came to Canada, it was kind of a different journey again now, because when I came to Canada, I now had the the experiences to kind of try to draw on as I was trying to get my standing.
Right.
So I did actually start with, I did get a funding to do an accounting program called ACPAC.
Right.
It was just when I was trying to see what the future held for me.
Right.
And I also actually, following on the economics and rural economy, through the Association for New Canadians, I got a placement with Enterprise Newfoundland and Labrador. And so I kind of did job shadowing there for about 10 weeks with them, and got to see the development associations outside St. John's, got to know how they were. Yes, but
that was how you
again, I came back to what, because I came to volunteer at the association, and through that volunteering opportunity, I did a program with Single Parents Association and got a placement to start there. And from then on, I got the job offer as a teacher there.
Right. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. I know you've got such a great career in teaching, and I know the many lives that you've touched with your teaching. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us as we had conversations with Fatima Mansoure and Grace Okwera. Join us next time at Sharing Our Cultures as we bring you the remarkable stories of individuals from around the world who've come to call this place home.